How do Americans feel about Xi Jinping sleeping at Buckingham Palace?
Well, obviously, you mentioned the AIB. That was a bit of a shock to the US 6 months ago because it's a China-backed organization. But now it's a different dimension, I would say, with this pomp and circumstance in the UK with Xi Jinping's visits. The real issue is whether the UK still want to remain a member of the Atlantic Alliance or not. I mean, I'm being provocative here, but the real question is, by cozying up to the Chinese in this way, is London willing to give up its Western alliances or, membership of NATO and things like that?
But hang on, Xi Jinping was recently the guest of honor at a state dinner at the White House.
He was, but what I'm saying is there are a number of tensions in the South China Sea and in different parts of Asia Pacific, and the relationship between China and the US is not the warmest, despite the state dinner you referred to. In this situation, we're talking about infrastructures being acquired by Chinese companies. We're talking about telecommunication networks being run by Chinese telecommunication firms in the UK, a European country. Now, this poses a number of problems, of course, on the long term for the sort of security of the UK. And meanwhile, the UK, just like the rest of Europe, is still very much dependent on the US for its defense and security.
All right. Were you when there was the UK that handed back Hong Kong in 1999 to China? Did you expect this rapprochement?
Yeah, in 1997. Well, I mean, obviously, it's very interesting you're pointing out this fact because I was then based in Hong Kong and I published a book on Hong Kong. I really think the UK has been sort of letting down Hong Kong. And not only, I mean, human rights and Tibet will not be mentioned during the state visit in the UK, but the future of Hong Kong, of which Britain is part of, will not be discussed in any ways because it doesn't want, they don't want to annoy the Chinese delegation. British politicians do not want to interfere with the future of Hong Kong anymore. So I would say I did not expect this to happen because I think Chris Patten, as the governor of Hong Kong at the time, made a strong commitment to keep an eye on the citizens of Hong Kong, and because it was almost 200 years of history, of common history. Now, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes for the better. In the later years, it was for the better.
All right, we are expecting to hear human rights brought up when Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, meets with Xi Jinping. What's your reaction to that, Philippe?
Well, obviously, Jeremy Corbyn is a Republican, so it's a bit of a surprise to see him at a state dinner at Buckingham Palace. But anyway, he's the leader of the opposition in the UK, and he said he's going to bring up human rights. It's good in a way that somebody will do that, but obviously, it's going to be a 5-minute plug into a sort of 5-day visit, which will be made of as I said, pomp and circumstances and many sort of grandiose, welcoming parties and checkers, and President Xi Jinping will address the British Parliament, and which is a sort of normal stance for a head of state of an important country. But one would have expected a little bit more of balance between the various stakes, and the business side seems to dominate this visit entirely.
All right, Philippe Le Corre, stay with us because I want to go back on something that happened last week. As you know, it's the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, the first document to formally set limits on the king's powers in Britain, a rare version from 1217 on display at the UK ambassador's residence. Now, it was originally to be shown at Renmin University in Beijing. However, authorities worried it would inject unwelcome ideas into the minds of the Chinese, much to the chagrin of some.
As a member of the young generation, I wish to see my country move step by step toward a perfect legal system. Also, I hope President Xi, during his visit to the UK, can learn much about the understanding and execution of human rights and constitutional politics, and apply them in China when he comes back.
Philippe Le Corre, what was your reaction to the Magna Carta being pulled from that university?
Well, it's interesting because, China is very much interested in history, and the Magna Carta has been actually very, very well covered over the past couple of years because of the anniversary. Now, obviously, if you go into details, it does bring a number of aspects which the Chinese government may not want to cover, as it's been saying for all these years that China has a different view about human rights, that it's got its own model of development, and that the first human rights is to feed its people. So that's what China has been doing, and rather well, in fact. But it's quite a different situation from expecting freedom of speech and entire freedom of reunion. And there's a new law coming up on NGOs in China, including for NGOs to register all their activities in China. So obviously this is somewhat contradictory when you are talking about the Magna Carta.
Philippe Le Corre of the Brookings Institute, many thanks for joining us from Washington.